Welcome to Reddit Blue Pill, Red Pill, where we go over Reddit stories and predict the outcome of the stories. Please listen and play along by typing in your choices into the comments. Today we have a story about a wife who was inconvenienced at the last second by her husband. All right, let's get on to the story.
Hi. For context, I am a 40-year-old and I live with my husband and 9-year-old daughter. We have one vehicle. I had two OB appointments scheduled for today, 2:45 annual Scooch to the Edge appointment, directly followed by my first mammogram at 3:30. Bit nervous. Last week, we had agreed to have my husband use paid time off to get our daughter off the bus at 3:15 while I was at the appointments alone. Today, when we got up to get her ready for school, he told me that he would rather not take the paid time off and told me to bring my 9-year-old to my appointment and leave her in the waiting room until I was done.
We have here a married couple who are trying to juggle personal, family, and work commitments all at once. The OP had already asked her husband to take their daughter to make it easier to make it to her doctor's appointment. However, her husband decided at the last minute that he didn't see the point of using his paid time off and asked the OP to just take their daughter along and have her wait in the waiting room. Initially, it sounds wrong for the husband to renege on his promise, but he'd be missing a full day of work just to look after his daughter for 1.5 hours. Also, some jobs are very stingy with the paid time off, and maybe the husband thought that it was not fair for him to use one of his few paid time off days for a task that did not need his presence. I also can see how the OP would be surprised to have this brought up last minute. If you agree that the husband should keep his promise, type Q1 blue. If you think the husband had a right to not use his paid time off day, then type Q1 red.
I immediately refused, not only because of how insane it sounds to me to leave a 9-year-old in a waiting room alone for 1.5 hours, but isn't that illegal? In the end, I had to reschedule my appointment because he kept saying it wasn't a big deal to leave her in the waiting room. And even he ended up storming out of the house pissed at me for being overbearing, paranoid, and overprotective.
I don't condone the storming off by the husband. That was uncalled for. However, the OP is using harsh words, and maybe that is why her husband reacted in such a way. She said he was insane and that he was basically asking her to commit a crime. A little overdramatic, if you ask me. She does have a point to be angry, though. Her husband is putting her in a tough situation when he had already agreed to take care of their daughter. If you think the OP is right to speak in the tone she did to her husband, type Q2 blue. If you think the OP was overdramatic and had no right to explode on her husband despite the argument, type Q2 red.
His justification on why this would have been acceptable is that when him and his sister were kids in Philly, he would have to wait in waiting rooms alone while his parents had appointments. But this isn't 1990, and I am not his mom. So, am I an asshole for not bringing my daughter with me?
The husband explains that he had to wait at the doctor's office for his parents when he was a child, so in his eyes, he thought what he was asking was no big deal. I can see how he thought his wife was being overprotective when he himself had parents that were more hands-off. But as the OP said, that happened in the old days where people were more trusting. Also, just because he had a childhood like that does not mean the OP wants to give their daughter a similar childhood. If you think the OP was right to ask not to take her daughter, type Q3 blue. If you think the husband's demands were reasonable and that this could have been a chance for their daughter to be a bit more independent, type Q3 red.
Updates. I have called and confirmed she is not allowed into my appointment or left alone in the waiting room as she is under 12 years old. Office rules. P.S. For folks asking why I didn't make an appointment in the morning, sometimes if you don't want to wait 2 full months for an appointment, you take what they offer you, even if it's 2:45 p.m. Yes, I did have an annual scheduled, which was previously rescheduled due to my being ill for the last one. This appointment was initially supposed to occur in October.
Okay, so we have a bit more information about the rules at her doctor's office. If she had taken her daughter, then the OP would have probably been asked to reschedule her appointment. So she is in the right here. But the husband would also know that the cutoff is at 12 years old, so his reasoning was not that far off at all. Young kids can in fact sit and wait for their parents, but their daughter was a bit too young right now. Also, if the OP had taken the time to ask beforehand if she would be allowed to take her 9-year-old daughter with her, then all this could have been avoided. The OP seems to be answering questions from the public about why she didn't schedule her appointment earlier to avoid all this mess. There were no other slots open, and she had to take what was available despite knowing it would cause problems for her husband and daughter. If you think the OP was ultimately right, type Q4 blue. If you think the husband was in the right, type Q4 red. Now let's listen to a few comments.
Jesus Christ, not the a-hole. Your husband is behaving like a spoiled child, WTF. You're at an agreement, and he backed out at the last minute and had a temper tantrum. Everything about that is shitty regardless of anything else. Leaving a 9-year-old in the waiting room is way less acceptable now than it was in years past, for all kinds of reasons. It may not even be allowed, which you had no time to check because of his last-minute switch. How is that going to work logistically, given she gets off the bus at 3:15? Edit to clarify, you say your first appointment was 2:45, so this timing wouldn't work. A husband who doesn't care about his wife's health and won't step up to do the bare fucking minimum for it is a Class A a-hole.
I feel like everyone is missing a slightly bigger issue here. Why is OP's husband so adamant on not spending a few hours alone with his 9-year-old child? Why, as a father, does he consider that thought so mortifying that he would rather A, work, B, piss off his wife, C, back out of a promise to his wife, D, start an unnecessary argument with the woman he married? Does this man have zero involvement with his daughter and consider her presence that much of a hassle? WTF?
So he wanted her to miss the last third of the school day to wait in a cold, boring waiting room surrounded by strangers for an hour and a half? All because he didn't want to be a dad? He'd even get paid for it. Paid time off. What the heck is his problem?
I'm just so sick and tired of women not getting the support they need. OB appointments are horrible, invasive. I always leave my appointments in pain. Then to have another painful appointment, mammogram hurt also. You don't want to be a responsible parent after both appointments. You want to be the one that's being cared for. Your husband is a selfish pig, quite frankly.
Not the a-hole. She is a child. I remember going with my mom to her appointments, but I would have to go in there with her. Not ideal, but I was never left outside. But I think the issue here is bigger. He changed the plans on the day of. He expected you to either miss one appointment or for your child to miss half school day because the times are not matching. He has no regards for your health, nor her education, nor your time, nor her safety. He would rather risk his kid than taking half day off to spend a couple of hours with his own child.
Not the a-hole. My OB would not allow that. Neither would any other OBGYN I've had in the last 10 years, nor would any of them allow her to come into the appointment with me. Actually, I can't think of any doctor I have that would let me leave a child in the waiting room by themselves for any length of time whatsoever. Though my PCP and cardiologist have no problem with me bringing my daughter in with me. In the grander situation, it's not like this was something you sprang on your husband. He decided out of nowhere, last minute, to throw a set plan out the window for no discernible reason.
Not the a-hole. I work in a medical office, not OB, and while it has happened with a child or two over the years, it is not something I would recommend as people are in and out and we try and keep an eye on our surroundings. Phones are ringing, people are checking in and out, and generally going in and out of the waiting room. Even though I would consider our office and area relatively safe, There is no way I'd leave a child there unless absolutely necessary. And I'm a Gen X child who was left to walk home, to the store, everywhere, alone or without supervision. Your husband's last-minute hissy fit was not necessary. Why is he so against picking his child up from school?
Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching all the way to the end and participating. Please consider liking and subscribing to watch future videos. Goodbye.